Hello and welcome everyone to another Foreman community demo. So if you have any questions during the demo, please feel free to write either in the YouTube live chat or on the Foreman on LiberaChat IRC. We also have the Matrix bridge up and running. I have seen from other communities that drops at times, but I'll keep an eye out and hopefully everything will go okay. In terms of the live stream itself, everything looks good, but as you know, this is a bit left to chance. So if there's something happening, for example, there's a lot of buffering, there's sound drops, something like that, just please let me know, because there's only a certain amount I can tell from here, and I will try to remedy it, or else have you all hop on with us here on the Google Meet. In terms of announcements for today, I don't really have much, except there is a new page on the Foreman website. And on that page, you can find a timestamped list of all of the community demos to date. They're broken down in terms of Foreman with Katello, and also the Foreman developer focused demos. It might be just, if you're looking for something in particular, it might be a handy resource to look back on. We had a request from somebody to put that together. Everyone thought it was a good idea, so we just went ahead with that. The only other thing really from me is that if you missed or want to rewatch any of the Foreman birthday party goings on, the entire live stream is available on our YouTube channel, so go take a look there. There are timestamps to each of the talks, or for example, you can go and read our newsletter, and in our newsletter you will find a list of the talks there, and you can just click and watch from there. So I hope you enjoy today's demo, and if there is anything at all that you need, just let me know. And up first today is Maria, and Maria is going to talk about search in the template editor. So thank you, and in your own time, Maria.
Yeah, hi. This is an old and a new feature, and disappeared in some versions, but I brought it back. And because there's no real visual indicator of it, I thought I should probably show it in the demo. So if you have an editor in any template, partition template, or a provisioning template, there's an editor, and you can just, if you want to search, the browser search will not work on all of the text in here, but you can press Control F, and then we can search for the term you want to search, and it will search inside the entire text in here. And it only works with Control F, so yeah, wanted to show it. And yeah, that's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Maria. And usually it takes a minute or two for people to catch up. So if there's any questions or comments, Maria, I'll tell you after our next demo, which is from Justin. And Justin is going to talk to us about the removal of Red Hat repos from the repository details page.
Hello. Yes, so in Katello today, there's two types of repositories. There are custom repositories and Red Hat repositories. And these have had different methods of creating them and deleting them. The creation was done because it is sort of a complicated process to set up repositories to sync from the CDN. And so that sort of makes sense. And the deletion of Red Hat repositories sort of mirrored the creation of them. So previously, if you were deleting a custom repository, you could just go here and click remove repository. But for Red Hat repo, if you tried to do that, it would throw an error saying Red Hat repositories cannot be manipulated. And you'd have to come over to the Red Hat repos page and actually disable them from here. And there really isn't a good reason for that, other than to make it a similar process of enabling and disabling. And this was mirrored in the API and in Hammer and in the UI. And we made a change now. Let me go over to the new version. This is a nightly box. you can now actually kind of Red Hat repository and just remove it in the same way that you would remove a custom one. See, it is successfully deleted. It also supports bulk deletion. So you can click that. And this is also mirrored across the API and Hammer as well. So this should hopefully simplify things. The old way of disabling repos is still available in the API and CLI. We don't have plans to remove that. This just sort of opens up another possibility and makes it more uniform with custom repos to hopefully simplify things across the ecosystem. And that's it.
That is great, Justin. So let me just check if there are any questions anywhere. And so far, we do not. So thank you very much, Justin. And up next is Ryan. And Ryan is going to talk to us about Python repo with a generic registration. So Ryan, welcome. I think it's Ryan's first demo ever. So best of luck.
Thanks. Yeah, I'll just introduce myself for a second. I'm Ryan. I'm a Red Hat intern working on Katello. So let me get my screen shared here. So I'm going to demo part of the project I've been working on, which is implementing support in Katello for the Python content type through a set of generic classes. Those generic classes are really important because they'll be able to be used to make implementing future content types easier. But I'll demo creating, reading, updating, and deleting a Python repo. And I'll also show syncing a Python repo, just to show some of the functionality that's been implemented. And then I'll show a little bit of the code so you can see how the generic classes come into play and how they'll be useful. So let me start by creating a repo. And I'm going to do this all through Hammer. So it says created. That's great. Do a read. Make sure it's there. See content type Python. And that's the name of the repo that was just created. So now I'll update. And I'll update by changing the name to demo repo update. Repository updated, great. Now I'll read that one to see that it changed. You can see here, it's updated, same ID. And now I'll delete this repo, this updated repo. Repository deleted, cool. And just to make sure that that's not lying, I try to read from that. Can't find it because it's deleted. Great. So that's creating, reading, updating, deleting a Python repo. Now I'll show syncing one. So to do that, I'm going to create one by making a post request to the Katello API. And I do that so I can specify a Python library to include. There's no way to do that right now through Hammer or through the UI, so I have to do it this way. So I'm going to go ahead and create that repository. That's created. Great. So I'm going to sync it. Okay, and this will take about 10 seconds to sync, I think. And this is syncing the SciPy library from the website PyPy, where a lot of Python libraries are hosted. And awesome, it's got all that content in the repo now. So what we'll do next is let's do another read on this new repo, this one for syncing. And you can see that here. And let me switch over to my browser just so you can see the you can see here, this is the mirror for the repo. All these packages have been downloaded for SciPy. So that's great. That's now that's syncing as well. So now I'll just take a minute to show you what the code looks like. This way, you can see how the generic classes came into play, because while it's great to see Python being supported here, I think what really makes this interesting is that it's being done through generic classes, which again can be used by future content types. So this is the Python registration file. And this has a bunch of stuff in here related to working with Python repos in Katello. And I'm going to contrast this with the file registration file, which clearly has a lot less going on in it. And so that's because Python is using these generic classes versus file is using file-specific classes. So to show you the difference, I chose this class here, this pulp3 API class. And just the thing to note here is that there's a bunch of methods here, and they're all making explicit reference to these pulp objects, pulp file, whereas the Python content type is going through this generic class, and rather than making explicit references to a Python object, it's going through this repository type here, which is what's created by the registration file. So for the Python content type, all of the relevant objects are listed here, and then they are grabbed by the generic class to be used. So again, what's great about this is, let's say this wasn't a Python content type, it was some other content type. That type could, rather than have to go through and implement all these different classes that are being implemented by the generic type, they just list the whatever relevant objects are needed in the registration file, and then all that information can be accessed by the generic implementation through the registration file. Yeah, so that's the Python content type, and that's a bit about the generic implementation behind it. If anyone has any questions about that, I'm happy to answer, but thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Well done on your first demo. I have one question from Jeremy. So will it be possible now to implement any content type this way? Should we convert our existing content types?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that for simpler content types that can make use of the generic classes, it's definitely possible. Things that maybe require slightly more complex implementation might not be able to make use of it, but there are definitely going to be like use cases for it.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ryan. Let me just check around the place to see if there are any other questions. And if anybody does think of a question for Ryan, you can ask at any time during this demo. So I think that is it for now, Ryan. Thank you very much. And up next is Jonathan. And Jonathan is going to talk to us about new content host registration settings.
Great. Good morning and good afternoon, everybody. Thanks, Melanie. Let me share my screen here. I've got another terminal-based demo for everybody. But today I'm not going to be talking about the Katello agent deprecation. Something a bit different today. What I'm showing to you is actually a contribution we received from an upstream contributor, Pat Rieke. Thank you very much, Pat, for these 2 changes that I'll be showing today. These are 2 new settings that affect the behavior of registering content hosts to allow you to ultimately lock down the registration process a bit more. One thing to note is that the default behavior has not changed. So in order to use these settings, you'll need to enable them explicitly. So you're not going to see any getting any surprises as you're registering or re-registering content hosts. So up on my screen here, I've got the hammer output of 3 different settings that control the behavior of content host registration through Subscription Manager. These 2 that I'm highlighting are the new ones. The first one here, I'll be demoing for you momentarily. Basically, this setting only allows a host re-registration to occur when that host is in build mode. So this setting is primarily going to be used by the type of environment where you are provisioning hosts through Foreman. That's where the whole build mode tie-in comes in. And so what is a re-registration? A re-registration basically describes when a host is provisioned, it's registered with Subscription Manager, that host at some point is getting rebuilt. The virtual machine, for example, is destroyed. However, there still exists a profile of that host in the content host UI or the host UI. So there's kind of a disconnect between the identity of what's represented on the UI and that new host that's being provisioned. And so a re-registration is what occurs when that new host is spun up and attempts to reassociate to that same host profile matching its host name in Foreman and Katello. So what I will do over here is take my host out of build mode. And you can see that I've toggled the setting to true. It's false by default because, once again, we haven't changed the default behavior of the registration path. And I'm over here on a terminal of my client. I'm going to run a Subscription Manager clean. This simulates that kind of re-registration provisioning scenario. Ordinarily, you may have done a Subscription Manager register with a force or an unregister first to actually clean up that record in Foreman and Katello. But this preserves that profile there to illustrate the behavior of this setting. So I'm going to try and re-register. And this is going to be a new error that is brought by the presence of that setting being enabled. And it gives us some helpful information. It says, well, this host already exists, but we've got this setting toggled on, just to give some indication of kind of what happened and why it's happening. And it tells us how to resolve that situation. Ordinarily, you would probably not really be seeing this if you are truly kind of in an environment where these re-registrations are happening through the provisioning process. But in the case that a re-registration does tend to sneak through, we print out why. So what I'm going to do here is put the same host into build mode. There it goes. And I'm going to clean my screen off there so it's easy to read. Try the re-registration once more. And this should succeed because my host is in build mode now. So that covers the host re-register build only setting. That's the only one I'm going to demo for you today. But there was a second setting to be aware of, and it is the host profile assume build can change. And this augments the behavior of the existing setting, host profile assume, which allows those re-registrations to, by default, associate to existing profiles in Foreman and Katello. In the case where this is set to false, to disable that association, host profile assume build can change allows a hook to bypass that setting only so long as the host is in build mode. So once again, this is really relevant to those environments that are using the provisioning process very heavily and want to really prevent any re-registration activity outside of that provisioning lifecycle, if you will. So that concludes my demo for today, and thank you to Pat, otherwise known as JC Punk on GitHub, for these two contributions. I think they could be really useful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Let me see now if there are any questions for Jonathan. Yep, so far I think we're all good. So thank you again, Jonathan. And let me see who is up next. So up next, we have two separate demos for recent changes from Bernard Suttner. So he is going to talk to us about a Katello change to regain package version, and then a change in Foreman regarding configuration of Ansible Salt Puppet, the hash for the and YAML. I think, Bernard, you're probably going to introduce this a lot better than I will, so I will shut up now.
Yeah, so welcome. I have two small additions to Katello and the other one to Foreman. The first one is about a feature which exists already. So in Salt and in Ansible and in Puppet, it's possible to merge variables. Currently, or previously, it was only possible to merge variables of a type hash or array. And it was pretty easy to extend that. So it's also possible to merge YAML and JSON data. So this exists for Salt variables, Ansible variables, and also Puppet variables, of course. So if the parameter type is YAML or JSON, you have a default value maybe, then you also have the possibility to select merge overrides. And if merge overrides is on, you can also select merge default, so that it will try to merge the default values together with the overridden values. So this is the first one, and the second one is a Katello feature. So it's about limiting the package version count. There was already a feature request available since, I don't know, years or so. So just think about, you have a repository like this. So you have, this is a Puppet repository, and it has, for example, a lot of different package versions for one package. And now you want to make sure that only one version exists in your target repository, which is provided then by Pulp or Katello. So this feature already exists in Pulp 2, but was never brought to Katello. And now with Pulp 3, we thought it would be a nice addition to Katello. So let me copy that URL. And then you can select the yum type. You set the URL. And here you can set mirror on sync. If you set mirror on sync, that option will not occur, because normally it would then completely synchronize the repository. But that's not what we want. We want to only have maybe 1 or 2 package versions available of the source repository. So if you would then click on save, it would create that repository, and in the end you would only have the latest 2 package versions available in your target repository. Yeah, that's all. So thank you very much. And this pull request is not yet done yet, so I need to work on the tests. Well, thanks to Justin Sherrill, who helps me to get these recordings done. I hope that it will be finished soon. Yeah, thanks.
That's great, Bernard. Thank you very much. I will just stop for a moment and check, are there any questions? I think a lot of people are on holiday. Lucky them. Let me just take one final look. I'm looking all around the place. I look on Matrix, I look on Libra, in case there's a delay with the bridges. But I think we are all good, Bernard. And if anybody has feedback for Bernard, you can also put it on the pull request. And thank you very much. So we are moving now to our final 2 demos. As I said, it's a little bit shorter today, which is probably not a bad thing. So we have Run, and Run has 2 demos for us. One is in the category of Foreman user facing, and it's to do with the new confirmation modal that the UX group are working on. And then there is a Foreman developer focused demo, just one about the reworking the React-Redux folder structure. So over to you, Ron. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. Let me just share my screen. And let me know if you can see it. Yeah, I think it will take time until it gets also to YouTube.
It is really, let me see, it actually looks okay.
To zoom in a bit.
Yeah, how is it? Look, it looks, just say, let me check YouTube, because that's the real tell. So yeah, it looks fine. So it's so weird. In my Google Meet run, it looks like a tiny panel, but then through OBS, it looks completely fine. And then in YouTube, it looks completely fine. So unless somebody tells us otherwise, I'm just assuming that it's some kind of bug in my Google Meet, but you're good to go.
Perfect. So yeah, basically that's a very zoomed in Foreman page. So we are not that good with responsiveness, but we will get there. Basically, we are trying to refresh the whole application to a better look and better feel, faster move between pages. As last time I spoke about the index page template. For example, here we use it in architectures page. It's still in an open PR. But while working on it, we saw that at least in Foreman and several plugins, we use the window confirmation model, which is kind of ugly, I guess, and differ between different browsers. So basically in Foreman, we decided to follow the Patternfly library. There is a Patternfly React project and a lot of components here. So we slowly we start to implement them across our app. So in this example, it's a new page. So when I click on the delete in this table, it will trigger a confirmation modal. And for destructive operation like delete one, we use this warning style that they provide us. Let's click delete. By the way, this is a new toast notification that Leosh is working on, also another open PR. And this confirmation modal will also work for old pages that was written in Ruby. So without them from even changing the code. If you go to the code, it will be, I know that we are in a user-friendly demo, but in the code, you will see something like link to and data confirm. So this is the data confirm. If I click on delete, we will get the same modal. As I said, it should be like a destructive look, a warning sign or something, which we will need to solve, maybe based on the message. We will see how can we do it without touching old code. But yeah, even also this page, just to mention, will look like we'll use the same templates. And yeah, and even in old pages that not written in Ruby but written in jQuery, we have the whole stack. So if you click on the X button, for example, in overview, you will also get the same confirmation modal. And I know that in Katello there is another confirmation modal, but now they should be the same across Foreman, Katello, and other plugins. So that's it for the confirmation modal.
So I have a question from Elzap. Elzap says, could we move the new toast notification up so it won't cover action buttons? Users need to wait 2 seconds or click the close button.
Yeah, actually, it's sounds like a really good topic to discuss. By the way, we have every Monday. I wanted to get it, but every Monday we have a UX interest group that you're very invited to join, everyone. And this is exactly topics that we could discuss there. I copied the agenda from Mel here. So we have a top level agenda, users friendly, and then we have a deep dive agenda. So you can join, and then if you want, you can leave or you can stay. But basically, we will try to keep it update and sync before the meeting. And it's on Monday, 4 p.m. Israel time. I think Europe, it's like 2 or 3 p.m.
3, but don't quote me, I'm the worst at. What we'll do is what I should do is put a little time zone calculator into places on the events as well. I think if people look at the event in Foreman events calendar, it'll just show in their time zone. So that's kind of handy. Yeah, in there,
Nice.
exactly. And Jeremy just thinks that the new toasts are beautiful, Ron. So I think that is all
It's not me, it's Butterfly. And Leos that works on it. So here, if you go to the Butterfly project, we will probably post on the YouTube video a link to it. You can see a lot of designs they have. It's open source library, and if you want to push a PR or have some idea to upgrade something, you can definitely use or suggest one of those components.
Cool, Ron. And there's another question that's not related to any of the talks in particular, and I'm not sure necessarily I'll ask it, but there's no obligation for anybody to have necessarily an answer. And Samir, if you're listening to me, we will, we can follow up with this later. But somebody basically is asking whether there is a plan or a timeline when we will see Ansible to be the primary configuration management for Foreman. As far as I'm, I don't really understand what they mean by primary there. Is there anyone here who can shed some light on that? If
not on my side, but maybe other folks.
Yeah, I think it's okay if Samir, I don't think there's anyone here today that can comment necessarily on that, but we can follow up afterwards. Oh, excuse me, my dog just woke up on my lap. Okay, so Ron, you're free to move on to your next one.
Awesome. So the next topic is about how we can write more easily React and Redux components. So we know that like the entry level to write components sometimes is quite hard, and there are a lot of files and a lot of tests, and nobody really knows what is the best practice. We discussed it I think 3 years ago, but maybe now a lot of changes happen in the React Redux community, so maybe it's time to revisit it again. I opened a topic for it in a post for it in the discourse, and it's there for 9 days. There is a general agreement, but I would still be happy, or we can keep it, I guess, for one more week, and then decide what's the best way to go, and I think get things done actually. So basically, in the past, we had the structure for Redux folder in Rails style. If we go to Redux docs, they also mention, they say that Redux is a library. They are not enforcing anyone to write in particular folder structure, but they know about a few structures that many developers tend to use. So one of them was the Rails style, where there are different actions, reducers, selectors, or another like main folders separate. And inside, I think you know better than me the Rails style. But because in JavaScript there are a lot of imports and not much of auto magic like Rails, I think it didn't work much. So later, or I don't know later, but many other people moved to domain style folder, where I have, for example, a component. I think here I showed the example of it. This is how most of our feature look. We have a component name here, and inside we have index, the component JS, then files related to Redux, constants, helpers, test. Sorry, I also have a dog here that jumps. And basically it's a lot of folders and a lot of files. And inside test, we have basically a test for each of these files. So we try to make it a bit easier to start and also easier to review. So the last suggestions from Redux, they created this slice files where they combine all of the Redux logic. We will dive to it in one moment. And for example, here, if you use they have Redux.js toolkit library. I hope you can see it clearly. But basically, instead of having a reducer file and action file and constant file, and even a selectors file, I know I'm speaking about things that most of you don't touch, but we really want to attract more developers and to make it much more easier. So basically here with create slice, you can combine in one file and make it much smaller. So that's one example of doing it. We discussed here in the post that we will create POC with a simple component to see how it make our life easier. And basically, we want to move from this structure of many files into something like this, like a component name, index, and slice. It can even be just slice.js. And test, we even discussed that we might not need the actual directory, just like test.js. So 3 files instead of, I don't know, 20. And yeah, and we also discussed that the React community and Redux community moved from a class component and a wrapper component to use hooks. So you can write a very simple functional component, and inside your component you use all of these hooks, and it makes also life much easier. And everywhere that you look today, all of the examples use hooks. So it's time to switch to that, I believe. And let's see if something else. Okay. And last thing is that today we have a lot of snapshot testing. It was a thing, I guess, a few years ago. But today also Redux and also React uses the React testing library. Their motivation is the more your test resemble the way your software is used, the more confidence they can give you. So today we write a snapshot test, like how the component will look if we pass specific args to it. And that's not the mainstream way today. And it also creates like massive, enormous files for us. For example, here in the PR Leosh created to switch to the new toast, we saw that a lot of snapshot tests were failing. So we said, because there is a big agreement in the discussion that I also want you to answer about dropping snapshot testing, you can see that in this PR, he dropped 700 lines of snapshots, and also the test for 78 lines. And now we need to write a small integration test. I think it can be 20 lines, and that will cover everything. So we want to switch to PR like this one, like 100 lines instead of 1,000 lines, basically. And I think that's it. We want to move to React testing library and to use modern approaches. But yeah, you see here the discussion. As I said, from what I can see, there is a lot of agreement, but for one more week and see if we get more thoughts. Thanks.
That's
Thanks, everyone.
great. Thank you very much, Ron. Let me just see if there are any questions for you or comments. So you have a dog as well, Ron. That is that came alive.
Yeah, he was sitting at me while demo, because otherwise he start to bark, if you can hear it.
That's exactly what that. I have my mother's dog, and I thought he was going. He just woke up suddenly the minute I started speaking, but he stayed quiet, so that's always good. I don't think that we have any questions related to your demo run, so I think that might be it for today. So if you do think of a question after we have gone offline, just feel free to reply, for example, to Ron's thread on the Foreman community discourse, or you can also, for example, leave a comment on the video and I will follow up with and get an answer for you. If you're rewatching this is the same, so you can still ask questions about anything you've seen here at any point. So first of all, I would just like to thank everybody who came along and demoed today. I really appreciate it in high summer season in the Northern Hemisphere at least. And I would like to thank everybody who watched today, and we will be back very, very soon in a few short weeks with another demo. So thank you very much. Bye-bye.